Mukti Abhiyan. And he's getting told on Bihar floods and challenges ahead. I call it a court conference.
Good afternoon, everybody, Mr. Chairman, and friends. I'm supposed to talk about Bihar plus the challenges ahead. My problem is I can't finish it in 15 minutes, So please stop me whenever it suits you, or whoever does it. And then we can talk later. Well, I'm in the issue of floods since 1984, when the 7th breach of Kosi took place in Saikia in Oriental, dislodging about 500,000 people. I went there as an expert on disaster housing. I'm an engineer by profession. And I could see the river flowing on either side of the embankment. One side is the original river, and the other side, the river that has come out of the breach, flowing through 196 villages, affecting 196 villages and about 500,000 population. I was at the end of my wits that if the party that has sent me wants me to build houses, where do I draw the lines for foundations, for cheap housing? I said I should be going away from here and tell the sponsor to call me when the river has receded and the land has emerged, because drawing lines on water, I can't do it. And I came back to my office, to my home. Unfortunately, I could never concentrate on the work that I was doing. Drawings, I am a structural engineer, and I was under the feeling that all those fellows that I had seen them in Saikia must have died by now. So whenever I lift a pencil or a T-square or a board, in those days computers were not there, that picture comes to my mind, So I thought, let me do something for them. But then what do I do? Setting up an NGO was out of my agenda. I was never interested in it. But then I thought of documenting it, the whole thing, and then I started writing, reading the river engineering, the hydraulics, the politics, economics, and so many things I did, to learn what the floods are and how does it impact people. I could find that there are 4 basic characters involved in the whole of this flood game. There are politicians, there are engineers, there are contractors, and the innocent people for whom all the 3 gang up to help him out or her out. And the last one, the people for whom these structures are made, they have got no voice. Most of us believe that the politicians are illiterate, they do not know anything, they don't understand the issues. But I hold a different opinion about politicians. I think they know everything, but they don't speak out. I'll just give an example. A debate was going on in Bihar Legislative Assembly way back in 1956. And one of the speakers, he said, he was from opposition. So he said, addressing to the speaker, "Speaker sir, here are the people from treasury benches, all white clad or some dressed differently with a cap on, and they are the decision makers. Unfortunately with these people, they can't see through the day. They can see only in the night. And there is a bird in our area which sees only in the night, it resembles that. So the speaker tells them, what is the name of that bird? He says, I've just forgotten what's the name of that bird. Will you, Mr. Speaker, help me out? Because that bird must be there in your place also. What that bird is called? Now the answer is owl. This man escapes, passing the buck on to the speaker. And the speaker also is now constrained to say, I also don't know, I just missed it. What's the name of that bird? Then sir, he says, I do not know, I have forgotten, you have forgotten. Then can we put that question to the house here? Somebody must be knowing what's the name of that bird. Now that name of the bird, nobody, including the treasury and opposition, is trying to or will utter, because it will be the content of the house. So all the politicians, they knew what the name of the bird was, but they all chose to keep quiet. So when we say that politicians do not know, well, they know everything. And I had met a minister, in Central, he was a big man, and I talked to him about the issues, about the floods and all. He said, Mishraji, do you know more than me? I said, no, I'm doubtful, because you are in the realm of affairs. He said, yes, you rightly guessed so. I have got more information than you, because for any information you have to go to the concerned person in the secretariat and whatever, and you request the person to give you that information. And he is Jan Sevak. The secretary there is Jan Sevak, and I am Jan Pratinidhi. So by that relationship, he is my servant. So when I call him, I don't go to him, I will call him that, look, Mr. Servant, I want this and will you give it to me? So do you think you know more than me? But he said, he clarified his position. He said, I am a Masiha of the people before elections. I talk about the poverty, poor people, the students, the labor and everything, but when I come back after the elections, I represent each one of them. If I represent the student, I also represent the teacher. If I represent the Malik, I also represent the Malik. I have to look after everybody's interest. And whosoever closer to me gets the work done. So the Malik gets work done, and you take me, because it's a part of my constituency. That is politicians, They are there to help us emerging out of the situation. And then there are engineers. A tribute to engineers. Our friend from India must be knowing it. That there was a Maya Rakshas. He was a great engineer. And who designed a house, a fort in fact, for the Pandavas. And the floor looks like a lake. So when Duryodhan, the other Kauravas, one of the chief of the Kauravas, enters the fort, he lifts his dhoti because he was afraid that he'll get into the lake. And Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, she laughed and says, Andhe ke andha hi hota hai. Father of that man was blind. So she put a cryptic remark, Andhe ke andha hi hota hai. Then he goes to Duryodhan, advances, took note of it, and said he will teach Draupadi lessons someday. He goes there and dashes against a wall. The wall was not there. The wall was there, but it was not transparent. She could not make out whether this is a... She repeats again, and they came. That was the day the foundation for Mahabharata was made. The engineers could design that. They can create background for a Mahabharata, but they are guided by the virtues of Bhagirath, Vishwakarma, Parashuram. Parashuram is a funny name because Bhagirath and Vishwakarma, they are the big name. Parashuram brought Brahmaputra to this earth and is never given the credit for it. It is all goes to Bhagirath and Vishwakarma, not to. And our people from Northeast, like Saikia is here, she will say that Parashuram is not recognized. हम लोग कहते हैं कि we all fall in love, but then the credit goes to Majnu. None of us. We might not be lesser mortals, but the credit is of Majnu. So that's the one. And then the third one is a contractor. Everybody says contractor chore hai. Contractor chore hai. But then the politicians enter politics after taking oath of Gita, Quran and Bible that it will work for the people. The engineer enters the profession by the virtue of Vishwakarma and Bhagirath, and the contractor enters the market. The day he comes in, he says, I am here to make money. Who is the most I came with the contract. And then there are people for whom everybody can support him. I'm an engineer in my profession. I was asked one question long time back when I was walking around the banks of the Kamla, small river in our area in North Bihar, and a small person, and he was a farmer, must have been a farmer, and a petty contract. So he once asked me, engineer sir, I watch you roaming around in our area every day. What do you do? So I said, I'm a driver cook on your river. And I'm an engineer. He asked me if I was an engineer. Sorry to say that earlier. He asked me if I was an engineer. I said, yes, I'm an engineer. If you need a bachelor's or master's degree in engineering is needed for an engineer being called an engineer. I am one. Next question he asked me, which year of your syllabus you are taught idiocies? Come on. My parents were good in teaching me, making me an engineer. You say I was there for learning idiocies. I asked him, why do you ask that question to me? He says, sir, this logic is very simple because we are all supposed to know to deal with us, to our problems and all, you never consult us. So that is the idiocy that I am talking about. Because the others we don't meet, the politicians we don't meet, and others we don't meet. Is the time over? Oh. Anyway, I'll just complete this. So then he says you must be appearing for some test, written test, Viva, Kosi, and other tests, so that you are taught not to talk with the people who you are working for. So I have given you the cross-section of these 5 people, but then talk about the Bihar floods. I say we resorted to embankment, and we all know what embankments are. It was discussed yesterday also, will be discussed even more. So I don't go into those details. We resorted to embanking, and the result is, in 1952, when the plan period started, the 25 lakh hectares of land in Bihar was flood prone. Now today, we have got about 68.8 lakh hectares of land that is supposed to be flood prone, and the embankment length has grown to 3,720. So at 160, it was 25 lakh hectares, and at 3,720, it is 68.8, and add to the loss incurred in 2008 breach of Kusaha, I'll have to add 4.15 more, and it becomes 73 lakh hectares of land, which is 80% of the total land mass of the state. That much of area of Bihar is flood prone. What do we do? The government tells us it was 25 in 52, then it became 43 in 78, then it became 61, 82, and then now it is 68.8. They are only teaching us history, just giving us figures. But it has become 73 now. Somebody should be concerned about it. How is it, all the investment in flood control sectors is doing more harm than good? Will somebody be worried about it? Then the solution comes, well, we can build embankments here, but the solution lies in Himalayas, in Nepal, in Barh, build a dam there, 800 feet high dam, and all the problems will be solved. Well taken. But that will be the solution only for the Kosi Basin. What happens when the flood comes in Maharashtra? What happens when the flood comes in Bagmati or in Gandhi? Are you not fooling people? So that's the situation. Our problem basically, I feel, is of two things. One, all the reports say that what is the least of the problem? The problem lies in the sediments. We should do something for the sediments. Are we doing anything for the sediments? Now the Chief Minister has just said that do away with Farakka and all, it is creating problem. Now I have a question. That has been created since 1970s, Why should it come after 50 years that we know that the Farakka is creating problem? No answers. They don't have. The other problem is drainage. 2007 floods. We had about 2.5 crores of people hit by floods. And that was the first year when the floods stayed for 2.5 months. Normally when you talk about floods, a rural area comes into picture, vast trees and all that must be flooded. stays for 2.5 months. Then the flood that was only a rural phenomenon has become an urban phenomenon too. Should we not congratulate our government to achieve that feat? That 2.5 days flood has become 2.5 months flood, and it has shifted from rural areas to urban areas. You have made it. I don't know where the solution lies, but let us sit together, all the engineers, all the politicians, all the people of course, that will never take place, will never involve people who have got the wisdom. Engineers, as engineers, we have got common sense with mathematics. The normal people have got only common sense. They don't have any mathematical idea, But then they have lived with the rivers on equal terms. If the river rises by 1 foot, it recedes by 100 yards. If it rises by 2 feet, it goes by 200 yards. And then beyond that, it never goes. The river never rises. So do we ever take this version and then deal with it? There is no dialogue between the engineers and the people. There is a dialogue, some sort of dialogue between the people and the politicians. And politicians say, I am a layman, I don't know anything. I am guided by professionals, or engineers. And you talk to engineers, they will say, in this bloody setup, I am working under a layperson who doesn't know a fig of it. What can I do? So they blame each other. And both of them are never available to the public to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Stephen Biggs, who's currently attached to SOAS in London. He's both an academic and a practitioner, I think it would be fair to say, having been at IDS, the Institute of Development Studies in Sussex, but also Program Officer with the Ford Foundation, and a regional economist in Delhi, and then a lecturer in East Anglia, and then back to being a visiting scientist in Kathmandu, and so on. So I hope we will feel that he's very well placed to discuss his topic, which is rural change in the Kosi River Basin, a capital goods perspective. David.
Can you hear me all right? Good. Let me first start by saying it's an honor to carry on speaking after such a notable person who's written a book. It really is an informative book about the floods and engineering of the Kosi. And it's by Kumar Mishra, who's just spoken. So if anybody wants documentation, it's there. First, I'd like to just introduce Scott Justice and Abhiyan Sharma, who helped me write the paper, my two colleagues here. And I will now continue. Outline of what I'm going to talk about. I was asked to reflect on earlier research in the Kosi area when I was doing my PhD there in the early 70s. So this is partly, mainly a reflective piece, but then fast forward to now. When the three of us are not going to try and fill in the interim period. And I worked in the Kosi command area in Bihar, and not up in the hill areas. But since working in the command area, I've since worked in the whole lot and am familiar with the higher reaches of the Kosi Basin. We're going to take capital goods and rural capital goods as the onus of this talk, because that seems to me to be one of the areas which has been lacking from academic work recently on rural development. That's the outline. Now the next slide. Capital goods, and this is just an economics recap, or intermediate goods, are assets such as machinery, equipment, vehicles, tools used in the production of other goods. And rural capital goods are when they're used in economic activities in the area. We use a Leontief economic framework which emphasizes the linkages between economic sectors. Not the analysis of sectors alone, but the linkages between sectors. And we are looking at Leontief economics looks at the structural issues of economies and the institutional dimensions. And so that's where our economics is placed. But it's unashamedly an economics framework. Examples of rural capital goods. Boats when they're used for tillage. Swing buckets when they're used for shifting water. Irrigation canals, pumps, tractors, two-wheel tractors. Now in the contemporary context, solar devices for moving, where the energy is used for moving water, either large amounts or small amounts. They include all the engineering behind the process. So people who talk about value-added chains implicitly are always talking about rural capital goods, because it's those capital goods used in all of those value-added chains for value-added production. And transport, which is absolutely fundamental to any understanding of agrarian and rural change, are rural capital goods as regards transport. And agricultural tractors, quote, are frequently, if not always, relatively more important for transport very often than for tillage operations. But they're called an agricultural tractor. Okay, convention input-output analysis. And I've put this, people who are economists know this. Essentially, you have sectors defined along the top, sectors. And so when you add up the output from the agricultural sector, it comes to the total. And this then emphasizes what we're concerned with is where the X's are, which are the equipment, the services which go from engineering and manufacturing sectors into the agricultural sector and into the engineering sector itself. An example, good enough diesel pump sets for shallow tube well and lay-flat delivery pumps. We would argue that pump sets, small-scale pump sets, especially these lay-flat pipes, have probably been one of the most important innovations as regards the careful use of water in Bangladesh, in Bihar, in this, and they came not from engineering R&D, they came from another sector, the plastic, and then came from informal R&D by people in the agricultural industry or farmers modifying and using them for careful use of water. So that's an example of where useful innovations come from. Another example of this is a microhydro in Himalayan hills generating electricity, which can be used for a whole lot of productive purposes, although the preoccupation of many programs is for them to be used for electric lights. And very often their capacity, use and maintenance is very low because of a lack of emphasis on seeing them as a capital good to produce electricity for production. What are we talking about? Rural industries. These are, at the bottom there, we've got a maintenance and repair site in Nepal with mini tillers. We've got two-wheel tractors from China. This is a site from Rajkot, from a manufacturer in India, in small-scale is a really interesting area on a number of issues of international fame. One is the River of Sorrow, the flies, the embankments, the silk. Sort of everybody knows, and that's an engineering issue combined with a reality problem. And that's profound, interesting. We've had another. But the bamboo tube worms and service markets, which were written about and promoted by Apu in the 70s, that innovation of the careful use and spread of a technology which is continuously spread is probably one of the most interesting research designs for irrigation in the subcontinent and internationally known. It's possible because the Planning Commission in Bangladesh in the early 70s sent a mission to look at those bamboo tube wells and the spread of those pumps, that it might have influenced the whole strategy of small-scale groundwater development in Bangladesh. This area is known also for the ADRI policy change. The confrontation in the 90s between a World Bank-backed design device on the Aran, the dam on the Aran River, was effectively contested by a group of engineers, basically, who did their science to argue that actually that was a phenomenally expensive way of generating electricity. There were many other alternatives in Nepal, and the other alternatives would also lead to a building of a capability in Nepal, not only to negotiate with India over dams, but build up an independent Nepali engineering capability around building hydroelectric plants of all sizes. And that has played out and has clearly been a successful development in the hydro industry. In the 2000s here, I've listed a number of other things we can talk about of the spread of a whole lot of interesting technologies, raw capital goods, at least in Nepal. We don't know about what's been happening in that part of it, of the Kosi Kumar area, because we don't have the data. Okay, let's go on. That's the wrong way. Okay, now my personal trek started in the 1960s and 70s when I was doing my PhD in Berkeley, where I was involved in the ontology of economics and macroeconomics. 5 minutes, right? Then we had literature in the 60s being written by people like Wally Falcon about the problems of the Green Revolution, a generation of problems. So in the late 60s, there was international literature about the problems coming up. Secondly, the same author had taken an input-output model constructed for Pakistan and said, actually, if you put small-scale and medium-sized industries into the industrial sector, you call them industry, you don't call them agriculture because they're small-scale, the structure of your economy looks entirely different. And the Pakistan economy looks far more like, as regards linkages between different sectors, the American economy, than what is portrayed by where you put small and medium-sized industries. So that's where I came from in the late 60s. I then came back to the UK, and there was a group at IDS Sussex experimenting with the use of linear programming and input-output, and input-output is a special case. So I joined the group who were there to develop this macroeconomic model where the structure of the agrarian economy would be nested in a bigger input-output model. And there was a proposal at the time by one of the students there to develop a bigger infrastructure. So that's where the IDS at the time, we had extraordinary privilege. We had visitors from India who had drawn up Indian plans, we had Ashok Rudra, we had Minhas, we had an extraordinary academic environment. We had also playing out various British academics, which culminated in an article called Dudley Sears versus Michael Lipton about the whole role of planning. So we had these amazing academics from India and playing out debates in India. I arrived in Pune, and there was another extraordinary situation with having S.K. Chairperson who'd done all the land settlement. So, you know, he was the commissioner, and he would explain to us all of this stuff. He was then moved on to the Rajendra Agricultural University. We had S.D. Prasad, who'd been the commissioner of the 1960 census, and a well-known statistician. So we had somebody to show us how figures are drawn up, fabricated, created, whatever. We had then Abhiyan coming, who wasn't only an ordinary IAS officer, but a well-known publisher of good articles in EPW, and as a commissioner, ran the promotion of these bamboo tube wells, which was, again, challenging the engineering solutions which have been handed down. Extraordinary context. Anyway, and the other person who was there in the prison, I didn't know, was a Nepal Congress leader called Vaskota, who hijacked a plane, and I met him. So here we had a leading Nepali politician that was in the local prison at the time. Anyway, 1974, I completed my thesis, got it off to America, to Berkeley, mine all went good. I demonstrated on a computer with 15K storage space, kind of a proof of concept of how you can model the agrarian economy, taking into account local custom methods of extracting surpluses from labourers, keeping dependency going. That was illustrated in the model. Fast forward, how much time do I have? None. All right. Well, anyway, fast forward. A whole lot of changes have taken place in Pune. Like Pune, the biggest maize market in India now. Highest yields of maize in the country. Economic demand for maize has led to that economic, so it's a different growth path from the spread of rice and other crops. A decline in customary payments, large-scale wage increases, increased labour shortage, major rural industrial corridors on the Nepal side. We don't know what's going on the Pune side. Pune substantial capital goods industries, but this is anecdotal of visiting there a year or so ago and just seeing Pune now is a vibrant industry supporting rural capital goods. Okay, this we've got to come to Scott and I did some analysis in Nepal about the different patterns of mechanization along the drive, because rural mechanization and industry is characterized by different patterns of different scale and types of operation mechanization depending on the specific region. Okay, right, I will come study, fast forward, what we found in a brief survey, major hydrological modeling on the Kosi Basin, we found that donors are funding amazing hydrology, but nobody's constructing any economic models of how the two interact. And that was one of the challenges I took on 45 years ago, it seems we've still got, well, not only a growth of the hydrology modeling, but almost no analysis of the economics. Bizarre. Lack of reliable data. We tried to find data thinking there would be. It's very hard to find. However, there is dynamic change taking place. Modeling, suggestion, revitalization of the idea of input-output. Anybody who says it's too data-intensive, too difficult, just reflect, in the 60s, people were constructing pragmatic DLTF models. So the whole argument that it's all too data, it can be done in a pragmatic way, for pragmatic purposes. I would include now energy dimensions, which gender and migrant labor, which I didn't address in the earlier days in the modeling I was doing. Include financial flows, and lastly, classify rural household groups more by groups of households owning rural capital goods and access to their services than by classic classifications of land ownership. Advocate large-scale studies in this area and short-term solutions.
We can't go on like this.
What?
You are taking time from other people.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Right.
You got to stop.
I will stop.
Yeah, please.
I think
You got to be
we
careful.
can come back to these issues perhaps
You got to
in
look after other
the
people.
question. Thank you very much, Steve. Next speaker is Rupak, who's a doctoral scholar at the IIT in Bombay. He's working in the field of development economics and political economy of water.
Thank you, Chair. I also thank ADRI to invite me to present my work over here. In my presentation, I have less to speak, less to say, but more to show. Mainly because my work addresses the floods, vulnerability assessment of floods in Bihar. And as we are in Bihar, so much has already been said about floods. So another reason also is that I'm sharing dais with K Mishra ji, and then I'm also seeing that Deepak is here. So it is really tough to find my own space between these two people. So anyways, let's move on to my work. If you look into the Himalayan, Greater Himalayan region, that it hosts 10 major river basins, on which 1/5 of the population of the world is dependent. And if we believe on the ongoing climate change discourse, that the increase in temperature in the Himalayan region will have its implication on the downstreams. So, in 2007, AR report of IPCC had already given some protection about the climate extreme events in the downstream regions of especially the Indo-Nepal regions and Indo-Gangetic basins. But these predictions were a bit debatable, which have been modified by the recently published Himalayan Atlas by Simon about the confidence level of predictions. So, as per these predictions, there is no great relief in future for the people of Bihar. Now, we can see the river systems of Bihar in this map. The rivers are coming from Nepal regions, and this is elevation map. So this is basically Survey of India map has been predicted by ASTRAEDM, and accordingly the this is the 3D projection of elevation. And then I want to take you along with Bihar. So that's how it looks like. So in the southern side of River Ganges, we have hills. But in the northern side, we only have some hills in the western Champaran region. Then this is the river basin map of Bihar. You can see the sub-basins of various rivers. And then this is the IMD station of for the rainfall, and we can see the annual variation in the rainfall. Like this, you can see the variation across the districts, across the years. Water level monitoring gauge stations of Central Water Commissions across various rivers. Now, the basic reason of giving you all these snapshots so that you should be aware about the climatic condition and which generates the flood across the years. These districts in blue shades is the districts which is considered by the Disaster Management Department the flood prone. So my work is basically on these 28 districts to generate the vulnerability index of all the districts. We have various conceptual frameworks starting from the risk hazard model to political economy, then political ecology, and then the integrated. The advancement in this conceptual framework has been that in the risk hazard model, the climatic stress was considered as external, whereas in the political economy, it was considered as the vulnerability is embedded. In the political ecology model, they considered that the climatic stress is a part of the social ecological system, and in the integrated model, they have considered that the climatic stress should not be considered in isolation with the socio-economic vulnerability. If you see the empirical approach to generate the vulnerability index, we can see that in the literature we can find there are composite socio-economic vulnerability index which is similar to HDI, where indicators are measured in terms of min-max approach. There is another multi-criteria IHP approach which takes into account the GIS framework. And in the econometric model, as per the cross-sectional time series or longitudinal data set, especially generating the probability scores, we can find the vulnerability index. In recent years, data envelopment analysis has been gaining recognition in estimating this vulnerability index. So, to give you the idea about the data envelopment analysis, we have to go back to certain efficiency parameter of farm level production, where given set of input, how the output generated, but why farms are different in terms of their efficiency. So, bringing that analogy into the flood parlance, we can say that if the districts are the decision-making units, then given the inputs, like the hazard generating inputs, or given the socio-economic indicators, why the damages are different across the districts. So, because DMUs are the efficiency criteria have efficiency score 1, so inefficient DMUs are measured related to the deficient DMUs. These are the recent literature which have followed the DA method in voluntary assessment, mostly coming from China. So we can see the input-output orientation, and I have in this work generated three dimensions of vulnerability. One is death vulnerability, second is agricultural vulnerability, and then the third is property vulnerability. So accordingly, I have taken the various inputs. Now, the results. We can see that people are living, people are losing more lives in district Madhepura and district Darbhanga and Samastipur. That's why these are considered the high death vulnerable zones. Now you can see that only one district is coming under the Kosi River Basin, and rest two are from the Advara group of rivers. Agricultural vulnerability is different from death vulnerability, because as you can see that the Kosi River Basin is not that vulnerable compared to some of the central districts. And when coming to the property vulnerability in terms of house damage and the public property damage, we can see that the Kosi River Basin, three of the Kosi River Basin districts and three of the central Bihar districts are more vulnerable than the rest of the districts. Do I have more time? Yeah. So now, since these 28 districts are coming from North Bihar as well as the South Bihar, in this DA measurement, I have considered only North Bihar while taking into account the upstream-downstream linkages. I have taken CWC, Central Water Commission's river water gauge level as the reflection upon the upstream-downstream linkage and the spatial rainfall. How did I measure the spatial rainfall? The rainfall with information of the elevation in the neighboring districts. Accordingly, we can generate the rainfall figures in a concerned district. So accordingly, the rest of the indicators are already explained. So you can see that in the North Bihar, Kosi River Basin districts are the most vulnerable, in addition to some of the central Bihar districts. But most importantly, you can see in the right side of the map that the Araria, Purnia and Kishanganj are coming the least vulnerable, though the rainfall are more intense in these regions than the rest of the others. Now, this work is ongoing, and we are also trying to generate the rainfall runoff. With the help of various GIS mapping. But I don't think that the result would change in much drastic way than the present results what I have been presenting here. So what are the way forward? Now this is a macro level study, but vulnerability is about individuals and households. So when we can take this information to generate more vulnerability index at the taluka and village level. Vulnerability is also about perception. So a field level analysis can be done to explain more about the stakeholders engaged in the flood-prone area. Now, also the North Bihar flood is about a governance issue between the government of Bihar, government of India and government of Nepal. So this coordination can be, a proper coordination can generate to lesser loss of lives and less damage. Now, there is one thing I want to concentrate upon, that is adaptive capacity. In the literature, we see that there are genetic adaptive capacity measures like Manrega his work has already elaborated upon, that it's not only Farakka because of which flood is accentuated, it's also because of the various embankment structures within Bihar, especially across Kosi and other rivers, which are generating more floods. So, from the angle of ecological sustainability, the ongoing river linking project is also one aspect to take care of, because with the water surplus region in Bihar, whether the river linking project can deal with the floods, we actually do not know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move on to a paper which, despite the program, actually has two contributors who've been told that they nonetheless have only 15 minutes. One is Stephanie Leder, postdoctoral fellow in Barh, and the other is Panchali Saikia, who's a research officer at the International Water Management Institution in New Delhi.
I'll be starting with a presentation of the work of Panchali, Saikia, Fraser Sefton, and myself on migration, gendered water institutions, and farmer collectives in a changing agrarian structure in Mittellandschaft. First, we start off with the context on male-out migration and the feminization of agriculture before introducing a collective approach for marginal and tenant farmers to address gender inequality and the rigid land tenure structures in Madhubani, Bihar. We will introduce some primary results from our applied research project on benefits and trade-offs of joint lease, sharing of labor, irrigation costs and profits, and we'll also outline a few questions of sustainability and upscaling of farmer collectives. So rural to urban male-out migration has led to deteriorating irrigation systems, limited incentives to engage in learning new agricultural techniques, land-led fallow, the stalling of the intergenerational transfer of agroecological knowledge, and perspectives moving away from agriculture and physical labor. One of the reasons is the inequality in land distribution and land fragmentation. Here you can see an example of two villages in the blue box in Madhubani, Bhatipur and Nawahi, where you can see the blue box on the top shows marginal farmers having less than half a hectare of land. Below is even lower fragmentation. It starts off on the bottom with landless laborers, pure tenants, part tenants, and so on. So this demonstrates the high fragmentation of land, which also makes it unfeasible to invest in irrigation and mechanization. And access to groundwater is often linked to large landlords. So water and land management is very much organized by only a few. So in the same villages, in the blue in Bhatipur, red in Nawahi, we have high rates of migration. So 75% of all households have either permanent or seasonal migrants. So in one village we have, for example, 60% of permanent migration. The family structures transition to more nuclear families. So you can see that we have up to 86% of nuclear families in the villages. The household head who makes the decision is, however, mostly male, high above 90%. So when we talk about the feminization of agriculture, does it actually mean women's empowerment or does it create new vulnerabilities? So in our earlier study we found both, and which is along also with other studies. So on the one hand, one woman quoted, I realized I can earn money myself when my husband is out. And on the other hand, another woman points out that she cannot bear the pressure as a woman because she's neglected. So she has to run 4 times to get the water pump owner to supply her water to her field. Building on the career framework, we looked into resources agency and critical awareness aspects which are affected of empowerment. So we found issues of being overcharged and underpaid due to limited knowledge on prices by women, we found an increasing work burden due to labor shortage, and female households heads, like the decision-making moved to female households head or other male in the household, usually the father-in-law and the eldest son. And there's also gendered access to knowledge on projects, markets, and community relations. So overall, women reported being conscious about capacities and bargaining limitations, emotional stress of feeling insecure, lonely, and worried while their husbands are out. So the question is, when we go now at a village level, can we talk about something like collective women's empowerment, or is it an illusion, knowing that age, economic background, land size, caste, knowledge and bargaining power is all very diverse within women. So although women take over responsibility for agriculture, their diverse needs are not yet reflected in local decision-making bodies. So the project we work on is called Improving Water Use for Marginal and Tenant Farmers in the Dry Season in the Eastern Gangetic Plains. It's located in 6 or 8 villages in Madhubani, where we present data from, but also in Saptari in the Eastern Terai of Nepal, Jalpaiguri in West Bengal, and northwestern Bangladesh. A collective group approach for marginal and tenant farmers targets land fragmentation, limited investment in irrigation and mechanization, as well as labor shortage. But at the same time, we're addressing social structures within the feminization of agriculture. We assume that intersecting gender and class inequalities are central drivers of the intergenerational reproduction of poverty in the region. So, as we talked earlier about gendered access to and control over water and land resources, and limited access to and sharing of knowledge. So a collective farming approach is a really radical rethink of how land and water are managed in the Eastern Gangetic Plains. We're talking about collective leasing of land for groups of women farmers who pool labor and capital and share profits. So joint ownership and management of irrigation equipment is what we introduced. There are 4 models of collectivization, starting from a pure collective on land, leased land, second, to a pure collective on voluntarily consolidated land. Third, joint leasing of land by tenants, but responsible for individual plots. And fourth, sharing of irrigation and labor responsible for individually owned plots. So the ones printed in both the first and the fourth model is what we piloted in Madhubani. 6 principles for bottom-up collectives are voluntariness, small size, socio-economic homogeneity, participatory decision-making in production management and distribution, group control over the returns, and a fair and transparent distribution of benefits, and as well checks and penalties for containing free riding, ensuring accountability. This is based by the work of Ina Agawai. So our research question is, how can a collective approach to farming address gender inequality in water governance and rigid land tenure structures in Madhubani, Bihar? The methodology is based on focus group discussions and qualitative interviews over a period over the last 2 years, following up the process of formation of the establishment of the farmer collectives. So we have basically established, not we, but our partner NGO, has established 6 farmer groups, small in size, mixed in gender, except 1 female and 1 male group. The male group was actually interestingly formed by a group of young male youth, so they got interested in the project and demanded to be part of it. And the members of the group were either landless tenants or marginal landowners. My colleague will continue.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'll touch upon 2 points in our paper based on what presentation Stephanie had made. And first is on the preliminary results. So this looks into what motivated the farmers to join the collective, looking into the group dynamics on the functions, on the management of land, water inputs, labor, finances, and the distribution of output and profits. So the main motivation that looked into is also differs across the landowners and also the tenant farmers. So before I go into the motivation, I'll just briefly talk about the 2 models that Stephanie had talked about. The first one is where I will refer to as pure collective, where the landowners are being approached and the sharecroppers who have been working with them kinds of combine and leasing the land from them and works as a pure collective. So they share everything from input to output. So the second model is where I will refer to as part collective are the marginal farmers who have their own land and they actually come in as a common pool where it's a common plot area to a boring well, and then they collectively share certain inputs and also on certain outputs, but not everything is collected. So on the landowners, they were quite interested in terms of the benefit that comes up from the fixed lease agreement with the land-based farmers, where the landowner in Bhagwatipur had mentioned that it involves kind of a project fixed, which is beneficial for him because he gets a fixed amount of paddy and wheat, and also in terms of that his land is cultivated during the dry season. So this motivation differed across different groups, both part and pure collective. So for the tenant farmers, the three criteria was the access to agricultural inputs facilities that were provided by the project. This was both for the pure and the part collective, whereas in the part collective they were also interested in the labor share. As you can see that labor shortage has become a major problem in rural Bihar, and the wage has increased. So they saw that involving and sharing of labor will be a beneficial effective criteria of joining the project, where they don't have to pay for the labor. Another key factor was the diversification of crop, where the vegetable cropping was introduced to this site during the dry season cultivation. So one of the farmers in the Bhagwatipur, who is part of the pure collective group, stated that cultivating vegetables will give them enough cash income. For the project that they looked into these two criteria that I had mentioned before, in the pure collective where the large landowners were approached first, and the tenants who were already cultivating in piece of a plot as a sharecropper were selected to be formed as a collective group. The second criteria was plots in a common area to a boring well was another, looking for the group formation. So this was criteria looking at the part collective where the marginal farmers got together in a common plot area which is closer to a boring well. On the management of the land, so the leasing land from a large landowner is a fixed annual contract where they get a fixed amount of wheat and paddy. For the rest of the crops that the tenant grow in the field is for the tenant as an owner, not for the landowner. The landowner finds it viable at medium, it finds it beneficial as I had mentioned, but few farmers, the tenant farmers, had great concerns over this fixed sharing of crops as a sustainability issue, because they say that earlier when they worked as a sharecropper, they had this 50-50 sharing, where they could give 50% to the landowner and keep the 50% for themselves. Now having a fixed contract, if they don't have enough yield or enough production of wheat and paddy, it will be a major loss for them. This is still under piloting, so the local partner acts as a mediator between the parties, between the landowner and the tenant farmers. The outcome of the collectivization looks into the operation of contiguous plot for feasibility of irrigation and plowing, and also utilization of the fallow land. On the management of water, it looks into the project-given shallow tubewell pump sets and solar pumps, which are shared collectively at both part collective and the pure collective groups. And the investment for the rest, like repair and diesel cost, is borne upon by the farmers themselves for both part and pure collective. However, there were conflicts noted on sharing of the pump set, especially in prominent for the part collective group, the tenant farmer group, the marginal farmer group. For example, the farmer in the individual farming group states the challenges over accessing the pump set on time, because this was shared by two of the part collective group. They said that when he wanted to use the pump set, it was used by someone else in the group, so he had ended up renting out outside the project. So there was no conflict noted in the pure collective over sharing of irrigation water. On the decision making over the application and use of this irrigation technology, it was seen as a shared collective effort for use of irrigation equipment, starting of the pump set, and when to apply the irrigation water. However, on how much amount of water is to be applied to different crops is decided by the one who actually physically does that irrigation work. On inputs and finances, I'll talk about briefly on the decision making over the collective taken, usually shared and collectively. However, there is a dominance of the most vocal, mobile and influential ones in the group. Piloting stage analysis and collectives are still dependent on the NGO for some of the decision making, say what types of crops and vegetables to grow, what kind of fertilizers and seeds to be used, and also on the marketing of producers. On the financial management, the groups actually comes up with this arrangement of collection of money every month, which they use it for buying fertilizers, diesel oil, etc. And this is common for both part and pure collective. Decisions on collectively are taken on this financial management. However, it is monitored by one of the appointed person who is called as a treasurer. There is, however, conflict notice on the financial issues, which is prominent in pure collective group over use of money for personal use, intransparent information on income and expenses. I'll just wind up quickly. Therefore, the NGO decided to split the control over this financial management, where the deposit box is kept with someone, the key is kept with the second person, and the account book is kept with the third person. This is a very crucial one, is the labor sharing, where I'll briefly discuss the division. So the labor intensive such as plowing, preparing land, applying irrigation, starting the concept is mostly done by the man across the group. The time intensive looking into harvesting, planting vegetable crops, weeding, post-harvesting activities done by women. But this also was seen across difference across the groups with man and without man. So in an all-women group, they were even more dependent on their male household members who were not part of the group for starting the concept, renting tractors and land preparations. Although they said that in their absence they had to do it, but they're still highly relying on them. The decision-making over different labor activities is taken by the ones who is physically involved in doing it, as I had mentioned before. Across the collective, there is a large dispute over labor sharing and division. One of the women in the pure collective group states about how they allegate of I did not work, I did more work than you, etc. I'll quickly go through the distribution of profit. The profit and productivity output is found to be the major binding factor for these groups. So after paying the landowner, the paddy is kept for self-consumption. For the vegetables, they collectively sell it and invest the money for the next cropping cycle. Lastly, I'll talk about the sustainability of the groups and upscaling. So I'll open up for the discussions and look for more inputs. So looking into the 6 principles of collectives of Veena Agarwal that Stephanie had mentioned, we tried to review these results and we found that the group formations are not voluntary and participatory and it is more NGO dependent. There is also the issue for the size. There is a lot of fluctuations within the part collective. Group size is also concerned for a pure collective where there is only 5 women and they said that they struggle a lot because they need more members in the group to do a labor sharing activities because they cannot share the labor efficiently with such a small size. There is also the conflict over individual plot labor inputs. Motivation to continue completely depends on the productivity and profit. Lastly, on the opportunities of sustainability is looking at the empowerment through knowledge pooling and skill sharing within the groups, improved bargaining power within groups and local NGOs, and it is to be expected to upscale with the improved bargaining power of the tenant and marginal farmers with landlords and service providers, partial diffusion of learnings, motivation and curiosity to try vegetables farming. This was one of the key driving factors for one of the youth group that has formed in Mohwani. They actually looked into...
Can we step?
Yeah, this is the last one.
If you read the slide, people can read
Yes,
it.
okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. I'm reminded of floods and embankments. My wife will bear this out. Reading in the Bihar State Archives an engineer's report from the 1890s saying, if you ever embank that bottom part of the Sun River, you will put Patna at risk from floods. And 3 weeks after it, we read this, 3 or 4 weeks after it, indeed, we had floods, and I spent a week trapped in a local hotel, waiting for the waters to subside. So I'm very much of the view that embankment policy is a thorny area. On the other hand, some of the things we've heard today make one feel slightly, at least, more optimistic. It is thrown open to your questions. Yes.
Thank you. Fascinating morning. On this. So, just a couple of points. One is this relation between being a farmer and agricultural services, and it links the first and the final presentation together, because obviously there's an issue as you start capitalising agriculture about who is getting rents from those new capital goods in agriculture. So there's a strong political economy question there of whether one is reinforcing existing power structures or the new capital goods enable power and returns activity to be redistributed. And I can refer to a program that I had a big hand in Bangladesh, where we actually divided the supply of water from the ownership of land. And based upon finding that farmers don't easily cooperate with each other to self-supply, too many conflicts. But if you actually have farmers cooperating as receivers of services, in this case from landless groups, so it was landless irrigation, and we wrote a book on it called The Water Sellers.
Can I just interrupt you there? I think that sort of conversation is really useful, but it depends a bit how many people are going to be able to ask a question. Shall we need to keep it?
Okay. So, we can count. So I just want to ask one other question, because it's not on us. I've just recently examined a PhD on the Kosi study. And the PhD was about mental health in the context of the experience of the Kosi flood. Very interesting, nobody ever talks about it, and it's a major area of ill-being in the context of persistent flooding. Thanks.
Very responsive. Other question?
Thank you. Yes, very interesting presentation. I would wonder whether there's a macro level picture which needs to be corrected. I thought the presentation on the emergence of new local level institutions is very interesting. How far will this generate macro change if they're not linked into something which is happening at the level of the region in terms of an integrated production system into which these will fit? I'm thinking the issue of migration. There are two big things which characterize the Kosi area: is water and its remittances. And unless the remittances are actually and the households which straddle both their home villages and somewhere else which is the source of remittances. Now, it seems to me that somehow that has to be built into the development strategy of the region. That there has to be a process of capital accumulation which is built on this flow of resources into the region, which can be used much better, but which at the moment doesn't seem to do anything more than support local consumption.
Interesting point. Another one here.
I have two questions. One's for Stephen and the other one is for Rupak. The first one for Stephen is, input-output tables are really useful, but I was wondering why exactly do we need input-output table for sort of a very specialized small region like that? Would it not be more useful if we had to go out and collect the data to see what drives total factor productivity across farms? Are they using inputs efficiently or not efficiently? That might be a more useful line of research than just looking at input-output tables. And the second question for Rupak is about creating this vulnerability indices that you have done. How do you decide what variables go into creating these indices, and how do these indices themselves change over time? Because I think some of those variables that you have are not fixed geographic variables, but are obviously a function of development itself.
Okay, I think we'll pause and take some answers and then see if there's time for more. Did you understand? Brief answers?
A reply from me, one on the last question, why use an input-output framework? It's a policy framework, so it's enabling one to think about the future. Total productivity frameworks are almost by definition looking at the past, and policy is about projecting and thinking about alternatives for the future. Second reply is almost why with an input, if you have the framework input output model, you're repeatedly sectors, and how, if one's in economic policy analysis, one has to look at the implication for other sectors. I think
Yes, there was a question about ownership of capital goods, and perhaps that's relevant for many speakers. Anyone would like to come back to that?
Well, just on the slide I didn't get, but Scott, if you could just mention, on the spread of capital, small scale capital goods in the Himalayan hills in the last talk a little bit about the spread of mini tillers, which came out of, quote out of the blue. Scott, can you just, because you're one of my colleagues, the kind of numbers, the numbers are equivalent to the number of the shallow tube wells which spread in the Kosi region into thousands and thousands. And it almost happened without any analysis. And that's interesting, and for policy purposes, is one going to then have policies which promote that kind of small-scale pumping device, or small-scale mini-tillers in the hills, policies as regards big tractors or small tractors? There's a whole focus quite often that there is just a single model of mechanization. All of our work in 8 different Asian countries is that there are phenomenally different patterns of rural mechanization. And that's something which I think needs policy models to help work through.
Thank you. I think with respect to your colleague, if we're going to any other questions, then we'd better move on. But there was one.
This isn't about vulnerability indicators, how did I choose. The output indicators are mostly sourced from the Disaster Management Department, which gives the damage account on 11 grounds. I have taken only 4. One is death, second is crop value of crop damage, third is value of house damage, and fourth is value of public property damage. On the input, my answer would be that I have borrowed from what the literature studies on the ground that vulnerability is a function of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. So the issue of which indicators are coming into which categories merely dependent on what attributes it shows. For example, elevation I have taken as the exposure indicator. In agricultural vulnerability, I have taken the crop area in Kharif and in the winter season as the sensitivity indicator. Adaptive capacity, as I have been telling that there are 2 major criteria. One is the generic adaptation measures. So, since adaptive capacity and adaptation are 2 different things, so that's why when I take gross domestic product per capita, so this functions as the adaptive capacity. Another adaptive capacity indicator which I have taken is road density.
Can I suggest that this is a kind of discussion that would be ideally pursued between the two of you, and we might get. You also wanted to comment on things, so we'll pass over.
Yes, on the flow of resources and remittances, if I understood it correctly, I would like to say that in the whole of Eastern Gangetic Plain, the study area in Madhubani and Purnia, the remittances are not adequate. There is an irregular flow of remittances because the migrants are unskilled laborers, and they are not able to invest it highly in agricultural inputs or in machineries until and unless there is a large landowner or wealthier household. Thank you.
And just a short comment on the understandings of macro change in our project so far, trying to find out the incentives of the farmers and the models, what actually works on the ground, on the village level. We came across some barriers, for example, for groups to receive subsidies on farming equipment. So that's also linking to the question asked about who gets the rent of capital goods. When we talk about irrigation pumps, tractors, I just shortly mentioned that this is very much linked to large landowners in the village, and you can access many subsidies just when you have land. So a huge group of marginal land owners who have no papers or tenants are completely landless and left out of policies.
Good. So we had another question. Someone from
Can I speak without the mic?
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Mr. K Mishra. Mr. T said that the biggest problem of Bihar are the floods, and the floods are very complicated to solve. And as I know, Mr. K Mishra is one of the personalities with the probably the biggest experience in this sector as far as Bihar floods are concerned. Mr. D, have you been the Chief Minister, resourceful Chief Minister of Bihar? What you would do? 1, 2, 3 in bullet.
Are there any others we can add? Wouldn't be, yes. That wouldn't have been a bad question to we're doing, but let's take another.
Can I just contradict the reply on remittances not being so important? Because, in fact, the evidence from our own services, it should be determined how that taking one village in Madhubani, since you're working in Madhubani, that remittances may be accounting for 30 to 40% of the total incomes of the villages. So, if you include migrants, the incomes of migrants and local incomes, you might be finding 60% of the incomes generated for the households in that village are coming from outside the village. It's huge.
Shall we then have the last slide?
Well, you put me in that corner, what as Chief Minister I do. I never thought of those lines. One day I become Chief Minister. But still, see, I told you while I was talking, the problem basically is water and sediments. Water we know how to deal with, sediments we do not know. There was an experiment in 1950s to for a power station in Nepal, in Kosi Valley. There were people appointed, engineers appointed, soil conservators were appointed, and they all left within 1.5 years because they found it's not worth doing that job. They are mostly from India, and staying in hills in Nepal was hard for them. That experiment was dropped or withdrawn, whatever might have happened. But then the slogan used was Nepal ko dhan, Hariyo dhan. That was the slogan given then, and it didn't work. Actually, what I find is, see, the basic dharma of a river is one, to take the drop that falls on the ground, part of it goes to the ground, ensure that it goes, part of it evaporates and part of it goes as surface water, and the surface water that goes along with it also takes care of the sediment, that it is sediment transportation without an unbanked river was free of cost and to the extent that water reaches. I don't know what is the situation in your part of the basin, but in our part, people say the water used to come earlier, the sediment used to come here, and then we knew that it will refertilize or rejuvenate our land. We will have a good rabi crop. Our areas are not kharif crop, it's a chance that people take. Farmer never leaves the fields, takes a chance, but if it submerges in water, they don't bother about it. But then, if there is a heavy flood, there will be a very good rabi crop. So that is the package, that this year we'll have a very good crop, I have traced the history of it, and I know only once in 1906 in Darbhanga, part of Madhubani area was declared as a famine area after floods. The only example where famine occurred after floods, otherwise we don't have any history of it. There is a lot of employment available. When houses were all kacha houses, immediately after floods, people used to get employment in that, then the agricultural operations will start. So that generates some sort of money or some kind from the employer. And then ultimately you get into the harvesting part of it. So the agricultural activity never used to stop, and then you have a Dharma crop where the remaining water could be used. So you had rice, most of the places we have winter rice, then there is wheat and pulses, there are oil seeds, everything is available to you, and then the fishes in plenty if there had been a big flood. So that should be restored to the extent possible. If that is done, then the immediate problem of the people will be solved. That will be solved. Unfortunately, the government is not there. There is nobody who is a taker to it. I don't know why we have developed enmity with everything. We want to control air, we want to control water, we want to control land, we want to control anything that we come across. Leave it. Leave that to its own device. And let us find out the solution. Not that I am saying that we must surrender totally to the nature. None of us done it. We were all born nudes. But then we have developed clothings. The other thing that we could do is make you blind. That you don't think that I am nude. Possible. Or there may be a person with money person who say, we'll put clouds in between so that there's no sun rays come to us. And there had been definite proposals on record that we construct a wall on the eastern boundary of India, eastern coast of it, so that all the southeastern winds that come and cause rains in that is dropped in this is dropped in the sea itself. Now, only thing is, there was nobody available to finance the proposal. If only there had been a person to finance the proposal, well, the problem is solved. There won't be any rain. But that idiot doesn't know if there is no rain, what will happen to the country.
Well, that's a thought. I think. Thank you very much. Can the speakers answer the question?
Thank you. We can move downstairs for lunch and be back by 3 o'clock.